Mediums of exchange. Yash Kale, 2021. Disclaimer. I am not an expert in any of the fields that I have covered in this essay. I may have made mistakes and might have gotten some facts wrong. Feel free to contact me at inferno080.com@gmail.com if you want these corrections to be implemented. Do not take my word for anything. Any misinterpretation or mistake is not intentional. I am an idiot and don't know jack shit, so let it slide. There might be tons of spelling mistakes and grammatical errors sprinkled in here, that's cause I don't have an editor, it's just me with 2 cups of coffee writing this late at night. I don't have the patience to read all of this again tbh. So, smiley face, happy reading. Chapter 1, Money. Origin of currency. When society was in its most rudimentary state, the system of barter was prevalent. A farmer would exchange a bags of wheat for a amount of beef from the butcher, so that both could enjoy the pleasure of a varied diet. Similar systems were in place for simple tools. The same farmer could exchange a mod amount of wheat for 1 pot or 1 sickle. There however are quite a few drawbacks to the system. A farmer or a butcher would require only a limited number of pots that would be used for their respective occupation or household use. A pot, being a durable good, could last for months without breakage. If no farmer were to require new pots, the potter and his family would have to go hungry, or rely on some other food source entirely. Another drawback was that some goods couldn't be split into smaller denominations. It is possible to buy a quarter pound of beef, or half a bag of rice, but it isn't possible to buy half a sickle or half a pot. Another issue arises with perishable goods. In a year with particularly bad weather, a farmer can survive solely on his store of crops harvested from another season. This isn't possible for a trader who trades in fresh game meat. If a hunter was unable to catch any deer in a particularly harsh winter, there is only so much deer meat that can be salted and preserved. As more goods are introduced to this model, and its complexity is increased, the drawbacks of the barter system become more apparent. This system was sufficient to support a small community of a few hundred people. However, more people introduce more competition and more disparity in product quality and quantity traded for a fixed amount of another product. For this very reason arose a need for money. Different communities around the world used different forms of money: seashells, animals, seeds, and most commonly precious metals. Gold, often in the form of coins, was used as currency owing to its high resistance to corrosion and decay. Gold is highly malleable and durable. It is mostly found in its pure form in nature. Its rarity and shiny appearance gave it a religious importance in some cultures. Similarly, silver was also used and was mostly attributed a lower value than gold. For many millennia, people traded in these coins made of precious metals. This emergency of currency solved many problems with the barter system. Metals could be split into smaller denominations by weight. The coins were uniform and could be checked for forgery or subpar materials. Coins are also easier to carry than heavy bags of wheat or non-perishable, unlike meat or fruit. X gram of gold equals Y bags of wheat equals Z amount of beef equals M pots equals N sickles. Over time, as the population grew and there was a shortage of precious metals, European powers turned to colonies to produce more of it. As the shortage grew, more and more coins with 50% silver and 50% copper began circulating. This did not necessarily decrease the purchasing power of the coin. Gold or silver had very little use value. They were used for ornamental purposes, but were never a necessity like wheat. The purchasing value of gold had almost no relation to its use value. Contrast this to the barter system, where exchanging more wheat for a larger pot directly correlated to more food for the potter. A potter could earn more gold or silver coins by selling a bigger pot, which in turn could be exchanged for more extra food or some other expense entirely. The purchasing power of these coins was dependent on the confidence of the people on the coin, which was often based on that stability of the empire and not the actual amount of precious metal content in the coin. Hence, as the amount of copper in each pound sterling grew to support the increasing demand, the prices of goods adjusted accordingly over time to fit the demand, but the confidence of people on the coin was what authorized its use till the present date. Banknotes that are commonly in circulation today owe their roots to the promissory notes that banks issued instead of actual gold. These slips of paper were to be exchanged in the bank in return for gold, that would be spent to buy goods. Over time the public began exchanging these paper slips instead of going to the bank every time to exchange it for the amount of gold written on the paper note. As the shortage of precious metals grew, the banks began signing more and more notes. It reached a stage where the banks themselves did not have the amount of gold that they promised on the notes. If all the people were to return the notes in exchange for the gold, it would not be possible. The banks essentially began printing their own money. Eventually the notes from a few major banks became legal tenders with their value floated relative to gold. Merits of money post-industrial revolution. This transition of society from the barter system to money ushered in a new age of division of labor, where one person did not need to produce something using his own skill set. He could simply work in a factory and earn a daily wage. In this system, every man or woman need not produce goods from scratch. There will always be some amount of farmers, miners, and potters necessary, but a man searching for employment need not be limited to these basic occupations. A man might work in a factory every day and earn a daily wage, with which he might buy bread and milk. Along with this workman, there will be hundreds others working alongside him to produce a complex product. Something like an automobile is impossible to be made by one person alone in his lifetime. That person would need to mine for minerals, produce steel, create a design, assemble the model and advertise everything by his own might. In a large company, this work is delegated to separate teams of engineers, financiers, parts suppliers, and assemblers. In a society where barter exists, something on this scale would never be possible. This progress owed to the large-scale technological advancements made in Europe during the Industrial Revolution. Innovation drives up the quality of life. Innovations made during the Industrial Revolution like steam power and textile mills, greatly improved the quality of life of all individuals on the planet. No one person could have chopped down the trees to produce the wood required for the frames and mine the coal by himself. This was a community effort that helped achieve the mass market adoption of these technologies. These technologies would have never been adopted if not for concepts like factory wages, stipends for innovators and specialized fees for advertisers and designers. Hence, division of labor is by far the most important use that came out of the concept of money. See money in modern financial systems. Modern financial systems rely completely on this concept of currency. There are large established banks that provide loans and have huge stores of money. They even have the ability to create their own money. The currencies of the world have almost no reliance on the value of gold. The purchasing power of currency is based solely on the confidence of the people on the currency. A 100-rupee note has no relation to gold, silver, or any precious metals. The purchasing power of that note is based on the confidence that people have on the currency, Indian rupee. The purchasing power can be regulated by things like inflation, heavy taxation, printing more notes, government spending, etc. Money is required for almost everything. There is tax on land. There is a price that each individual needs to pay in order to buy a house or rent a residence. One must pay a decided price to buy groceries and food. There is a tax on water. To run electricity, an individual must pay the electricity bill. Apart from these basic needs, in order to purchase a product, it must be exchanged for money, may it be a simple pencil worth just $1 or a brand new Tesla Model X worth $79,990. Education is partially free, but all the faculties need to be paid and all the monetary requirements must be fulfilled by the government. Hence, education is not necessarily free. The cost of education is either paid by taxpayer money or taking on public debt. The roads that are built to transport goods and people around are paid by taxpayer money, and so are the military, police and other emergency services. Research facilities are backed by corporations with huge amounts of capital. Any artist is compensated for his work, fairly or unfairly. Free aid provided to the underprivileged is donated by individuals. A person in turn, earns money by working, investing, gifts or gambling. In our world, there is no such thing as a free product. All the resources required by humans must be produced somewhere. The bread in the supermarket is produced by a bakery that needs to pay for electricity. The wheat required by the bakery is produced by a farmer that must in turn pay for the new tractor he purchased to till the land. At each step, there is generated profit. This profit is the purchasing power of that farmer or the bakery, assuming they have no other source of income. The farmer may use the money he gained by selling wheat to buy beets for his own use, fertilizers to improve his yield, or sending his daughter to college. The bakery may use the profits to give its employees a raise, to expand into making a new product such as cupcakes, or to renovate the facility with better tools to produce more bread more efficiently. The price for all these expenses is borne by the consumer when he buys the loaf of bread. There can never exist a free product. Money can be exchanged for nothing as a gift or donation, but it is never possible to buy a free product. Let us assume there is a man named Mark who wishes to get a free cheese sandwich. In order for it to cost nothing, from the cheese used in the sandwich to the bread, he must incur the following costs. 1. The cost of seeds of wheat plant. 2. The cost of water and fertilizer. 3. The cost of salt other condiments used in bread production. 4. The cost of cow that gives milk to produce cheese. 5. The cost of proper utensils to make milk into cheese. 6. The cost of land needed. Theoretically, it is possible for Mark to find seeds of wild grass, use river or rainwater for irrigation, travel to the beach and find natural salt, milk a wild animal like deer, craft earthenware from dirt, and carry out this entire process in the woods. One might think that on following these steps, Mark might be able to obtain a free product by using free natural resources. However, there is a hidden cost to all of this. The cost of Mark's labor. If he had spent the same time working on his office job, he would have earned money. He could have sold his manpower to work for something else and probably would have earned more money than he saved on the sandwich. This gap is the cost of his sandwich, which would be ironically more than the cost of a supermarket sandwich. But what if Mark had found the sandwich in a garbage bin? What a spoiled kid named Dave threw a perfectly fine sandwich in the bin. Mark can claim the sandwich to be free, but in reality, the chain of costs required to produce it has not changed. It doesn't matter who eats the sandwich, Dave or Mark. Once the sandwich has been produced, its cost has been paid by someone, somewhere on this planet. Even the small time and energy spent by Mark to travel to the woods to bite from a wild apple, is labor. Finding an apple in the forest and eating it for breakfast once instead of a store-bought one might be a way to save you money, but it is not free. The only change is that the producer of food in this case is Mark, who used his own labor to forage, instead of paying someone else to farm the apple. There are a few exceptions to this. The air we breathe, the sunlight that enables us to see can be considered as free, but to put any of that to use, we must incur additional costs. To breathe, we require energy that is provided by food which by its very nature cannot be free. There are two methods to procure any product, to labor for it oneself or by spending money. The money spent is then indirectly used to buy the laboring capacity of others. In our earlier example, if Mark works hard to obtain a sandwich by himself, instead of buying a ready-made supermarket one, he is spending his laboring capacity to obtain it. Alternatively, if he buys the supermarket sandwich, he pays for the labor of the others, the farmer, the milkman, the packaging company, and the supermarket manager. If stripped to its most basic form, all payment is done by labor. Money is just a means to translate this laboring power into something tangible that human brains can grasp. Labor is a subjective quantity. Money is the translation of this subjective quantity into an objective one. The amount of money a person has is most often directly proportional to the influence he has. More money can buy more labor, which in turn can be put to use to make profits. The profits that a farmer makes by selling wheat to the bakery is in the form of money. This money can be utilized for many purposes. For simplicity's sake, we can define 3 actions that the farmer might take. Providing for his family or himself. Buying a tractor to increase production. Sending his daughter to college. In the first case, the farmer might buy meat from the butcher. Here he pays directly by using his national's currency, for the labor of the cow farmer and the labor of the butcher. The cow farmer and the butcher earn a fixed sum of money back, as compensation for their labor and additional overhead costs. These costs can in turn be dissolved into labor too. Buying feed for the cow using money is the same as compensating another farmer for the efforts he undertook to obtain the hay. Similarly, buying a tractor for himself is a method of increasing his own profits. Better crop yield would mean more profits for the next harvest season. The cost for buying the tractor can be dissolved into the cost of labor as well, namely, the cost of labor of the engineers, designers, miners, marketing teams, etc. The third case is a much more nuanced one and will be covered in a future chapter. In contrast to the other 2 cases, education doesn't give back any tangible product. Let us for now consider education as means to hone skills in a particular department, that will produce some kind of labor that would be useful to the society when the farmer's daughter reaches a working age. In the first 2 cases, we observe that the farmer pays for the labor of others using currency. This currency, in turn, was earned by the farmer by using his own labor, harvesting wheat in his fields. We can say that the farmer indirectly pays for the labor of others using the labor of his own. We have already established that no product is free. Everything has either one of 2 things attached to it: the upfront cost, the price tag on the packaging of the sandwich, or the labor, if Mark decides to make his own sandwich. We have also established that the price tag on the sandwich is nothing but the cost of labor translated into an objective value. Even if we consider the larger picture, most of the individuals work to earn a fixed salary. This salary is their labor translated on an objective scale. Everyone from a software engineer, a NBL player, a miner, a barista, or an army officer is compensated for their specialized skill set. The salary they gain increases their purchasing power, by which they might buy necessities or luxury goods and services for their entertainment. This purchasing power is the ability to command labor. The more money a person owns, the more his capacity to use the labor of others. Another way to earn money is by investing. In theory, in its most bare form, investing is nothing but using an AXA amount of money to buy a commodity, hoping that the commodity will yield more value than the AXA amount spent to purchase it. In the stock market, the ownership of companies is traded. The amount spent to buy the stock might be earned by working. If a company's stock price were to go down, it would mean a loss for the investor. If the stock price goes up, the investor makes a profit. This money gained, however, doesn't appear out of thin air. In theory, the amount invested in the company is used for the betterment of the company. Let us assume that the company makes plastic bottles. Using this money gained from selling a part of the company, the CEO decides to use better quality plastic as compared to its competitors. This increases the sale of the company's plastic bottles, in turn making the company more valuable and thereby increasing the stock price. The investor, thus, makes a profit. The profit gained by the investor is the cause of his labor. The labor might not be apparent at first glance. Imagine a data set of 100 companies. The performance of these 100 companies is unknown. An investor is blindfolded and asked to invest in all the 100 companies. Let us assume that 50% of the companies make a profit and the other half make a loss. Here the investor makes no profit, nor bears any loss, assuming the net profitable companies in his portfolio fared as good as the other half of his portfolio fared badly. Realistically, this might sound a bit far-fetched. The investor might actually make a profit or even bear a loss. However, on taking a large enough data set, the best companies are cancelled out by the worst performing ones and the net profits move to a mean position of 0%. Theoretically, we might assume that the blindfolded investor makes a profit of $0. In contrast, if another wiser investor studies the performance of the companies he wishes to buy the stock of, he has a greater probability of making a profit. The only cost, however, is the tenuous labor he spent while analyzing the performance metrics or the candlestick graphs. The same can be said for any other investments, cryptocurrencies, NFTs, mutual funds, commodity trading, or even outrageously expensive Pokemon cards. Time and study of the available options are what yield profits. There is no magic formula to gain money without using labor. Money is labor and labor is money. Some investments are considered as non-volatile or risk-free. These include government bonds or fixed deposits. These, however, come with their own set of risks. The banks or government can default on the loan payment. The stability of the government is only dependent on loyalty and trust. Governments rise and fall all the time. In modern society, we enjoy relative stability. Hence, these investments are viewed as safe. A bond is nothing but a government borrowing money from the investor. The interest earned by the investor is paid for by the government, which makes money by either taking more debt, or by taxes. Taxes are nothing but the cost of labor of government employees, or contractors. For low-interest fixed deposits, if the inflation rate rises above the interest rate, that can lead to a net loss. The interest paid by the banks is nothing but money of other investors, or money earned by the bank from interest on the loans issued by them. Hence, we can establish that an investor doesn't earn free money. He does it by using his own intelligence to find suitable investments. He also earns money by using his labor in the form of trust and loyalty, to the bank and to the government. This leads me to conclude that investing is nothing but a form of gambling and donation. Note that investing is a very complex field and I have only explained a very rudimentary form of investing. In the real world, investing is much more complicated. However, it can be boiled down to a unique blend of gambling and gifting. The investor rewards the company or commodity by using his labor in the form of research or confidence. The only thing that differentiates gambling from investing is that gambling is a form of entertainment. A gambler doesn't care about what would happen to his money if it would be used for a good cause or something unproductive. Gambling money is in exchange for entertainment. An investor, however, cares for his money, or labor, by keeping an eye on how the money is utilized. An investor has confidence in the future of his investment. No gambler really cares about how his money is going to be used after it is set on the table. An investor gifts his confidence to the future of the commodity or company. Gifting is an altruistic habit that is a complex evolutionary trait. Gifts can be monetary, or in the form of labor. In the above example, an investor does the bottling company a favor by reading and analyzing its performance sheets. If hundreds and thousands of investors do the same, it will make the stock price rise, considering that it is a relatively wise investment. This gift of confidence is nothing but labor done by the investor and sense of satisfaction he has by seeing the good track record of the company. These are very vague and subjective terms that again translate to money. Higher investor confidence directly results in an increase in the value of the stock of the bottling company. Gifts can take many complicated forms. A friend giving his classmate a check of $10 doesn't make a lot of economic sense. It might seem that the classmate just earned free money. This, however, doesn't take into account the social expectations or the evolutionary importance of gifting and donations. True altruism cannot exist. The men of the Stone Age used to give food and tools to others for protection and peace. Man is a social animal. Our prefrontal cortex is responsible for the complicated social interactions between our species. This part of our brain is very developed, especially as compared to other mammals. We have been gifting things to others for many millennia in expectation of social acceptance, sense of security, to have a better chance at mating, or even as means of truce during wars. When the classmate receives his $10 from the friend, it is in return for love and social security. These emotional and social aspects sometimes have precedence over what one might assume is rational economic thinking. If all my classmates are gifting my best friend something for his birthday, would I refuse to buy a gift purely out of my selfish economic rationale? Or would I remember all the hardships that my friend has helped me through and reward him with cash for his birthday? It might be easy to view this through a pessimistic lens. Does every person who gifts you expect something in return? Theoretically, no. Person A gives person B either money or a product and doesn't ask for anything in return. This should be the end of a transaction. However, this assumption does not take into account the complex emotions and social expectations involved in the process. If you continually gift a stranger things that he likes, he is going to be more friendly with you. That is how our social interactions work. On the contrary, if a friend always gifts you a nice artifact for Christmas, and you get him nothing in return, that is bound to make him a little upset. The process of gifting makes no economic sense but is an integral part of our evolutionary ability to live together as a society. Even if a person tries to be as selfish as possible, the best strategy for his survival is to make other people like him, and not turn into a recluse stereotype that is often portrayed as selfish. The process of selecting a gift itself is labor-intensive. I might give a new acquaintance a pen for his birthday, but to my best friend, I gift her a hand-drawn painting of her cat and try to put in extra effort. Hence gifting is actually an exchange of labor, even if it doesn't seem so at the first glance. Donations to the poor is another thing that might seem altruistic, but is not. Most often, charity is done to flaunt power. Philanthropy is done by the rich to convince the rest of the 99% population that their motives are noble. It is most often a method to reduce criticism when they spend money on billion-dollar yachts. I shall explore this concept in future chapters. This might paint a very bad picture of kindness. After all, anonymous donations are done off cameras and there are thousands of volunteers worldwide who help in disaster relief. Such people find pleasure in helping others. In exchange for their monetary support, they buy the feeling of moral superiority. They feel good when they help others. It is a selfish motive. Note that I do not mean to paint these kind souls in a bad light. I think that donations and charity work are extremely crucial. Charity of any kind is inherently good for society. However, from this essay, I mean to paint the picture that when a person gives away money, that they earned from labor, there is always something that they get in return. Another example is parents helping provide for their children. This is something I would like to discuss in a separate chapter. Till now we have established that in the modern world, there are the following types of transactions. Labor money. Money labor. Labor labor. Labor money is simple. A person gets money in exchange for his skills and services. A farmer that sells wheat to the bakery and gets money in return. In a money labor transaction, a person spends his own money to use the labor of others. Mark buys a sandwich and pays a price in exchange for the labor required to make the sandwich. Labor transactions are extremely simple. These were the main modes of transaction during the barter system of the olden days. It is still used today, though on a smaller scale and for smaller transactions. This may include exchanging homemade meals with neighbors, two friends massaging each other after gym, or mainly in gifting where one form of labor is a hidden in the form of the weight of social expectations. However, it is at utmost importance to note that all transactions are inevitable labor. Using our previous example, let us assume that Mark has a job as a software engineer. He earns a monthly salary in exchange for his coding skills. Mark then uses this money to buy a sandwich. Thus, money acts as a middle placeholder for the smaller denomination of subjective labor that Mark does. It is not possible for Mark to code an entire web application every time he needs to buy a sandwich. Coding a website from scratch probably earns more money than purchasing a sandwich. Also, nobody requires a new website every time Mark wishes to eat a sandwich. Hence money, an objective quantity, is used to split Mark's labor into smaller denominations. Here, money is only an intermediate step. We can say that Mark uses 3% of his web development skills to buy a sandwich, which would be absurd. However, in reality, that is exactly what happens. How does Mark decide that he must use 3% and not 4% of his labor to buy a sandwich? He doesn't. Mark is paid in money. He is compensated for his skills by the company he works in. He gains a salary equivalent to the amount that the company deems fit. The company that Mark works at is the one that decides the monetary objective value of Mark's subjective coding skills. This value is decided by what the company thinks is the value of Mark's labor. Note that this might change from company to company. Another firm might be impressed by Mark's skills and might be in a dire need of a website overhaul. They might pay Mark higher than what he was paid earlier, only because the new firm thinks that the value of Mark's work is equal to this new amount. Hence, we can conclude that even though money pegs labour's abstract value in a measurable scale, labor, by its very nature, will always have a relative value. Note that there is no money-money transaction. This is because money is what is called a fungible good. There is no gain in exchanging a $100 bill for another $100 bill. Similarly, the value of a $100 bill and 10 $10 bills is the same. It doesn't make much sense in preferring one over the other. A person wouldn't really care if he was paid $100 in either way. Money is not actually perfectly fungible, because stolen banknotes actually have lower value than normal notes. This is because the serial numbers of these notes are blacklisted. This is, however, an exception, and for the most part, money is considered fungible. One may consider exchanging foreign currencies might be a kind of money-money exchange, but there is no change of value overall after such a transaction. If a person flies to India and exchanges all his USD into INR, it won't really affect his anything until he actually uses that exchanged currency. In contrast, labor is non-fungible. Each person is different and his skills are different. Even two people of the same occupation can have vastly different preferred methods of work, in return having an effect on the outcome. Two software developers might have very different coding styles and might be experienced in using different frameworks. Technically speaking, one software developer might fare better than another in a company only because he uses a particular framework that the company already uses, even though they both have the same degree. Hence, we can conclude that labor is non-fungible and immeasurable. Labor can have no absolute value. One cannot say that the skills of this software developer is worth $a and of another is worth $a. Labor is affected by social interactions and human nature. Labor has an emotional abstract aspect to it which makes it very subjective. Labor can only assume a temporary monetary value and can never be accurately translated into an objective measure. The shortcomings of current economic systems. If I were to ask a group of strangers about what their idea of a perfect utopian future would look like, or when they would consider humanity to be a perfectly successful civilization, here are a few common answers. When we overcome the hurdles of poverty and inequality. When we achieve global peace. When achieve a highly technological state, with humanity being an interplanetary civilization. When we curb the impending climate disaster. Let us now individually assess these common concerns. The burden of poverty on society has existed since the dawn of civilization. Poverty is by no means a modern concept. On the contrary, one might argue that the life of the poor today is much better than a peasant medieval Europe. Slavery was persistent in the olden days. I will get back to this point later. This practice was undoubtedly cruel and unproductive. The quality of life of the poor people today is much better than the slaves or serfs of the past. This, however, does not solve a fundamental issue. The wealth gap between the rich and the poor continues to rise in our modern economic systems. The quality of life of the poor does not continue to increase at the same rate as the opulence of the rich. The improvement of quality of life is of no use if people are still dying of starvation. The core of civilization, water and food, are still not accessible to a vast majority of people on the planet. What is the use of having self-driving cars and a Mars colony if we still cannot provide food to a beggar in rural Uganda? I am not against innovation or scientific inquiry. Advancements in technology lead to the betterment of quality of life. From the textile mills of the Industrial Revolution to the social media sites of today, each new technology brings a paradigm shift to the very structure of our society. Theoretically, these tools can be used to improve our lives and solve the issues of poverty and inequality. Optimistic individuals have been dreaming of a utopia where all dirty work is automated and all humans live in perpetual happiness, free from work. Realistically, this future is distant and we are not yet technologically capable of automating every task and creating perfect machine learning algorithms. The dream of an AI singularity currently lies in the realm of science fiction. The pace of development and the motive of development are arguably the most important aspects of any invention. It is technologically possible to rid humanity of poverty. We produce more food than we consume. We can carry out impressive logistical feats to other parts of the solar system, then why can't we transport excess food to areas with famine? The answer to this question is in reality very complicated. Geopolitics, the specifics of the product to be shipped, the travel distance, the charity organization undertaking this mission, are all factors on which such a project depends. What I mean to portray using this example is that we are more than capable to theoretically achieve this, but external factors prohibit us from doing so. Nothing is more efficient and ruthless at completing a task than billion-dollar companies. These megacorporations have all the capital and skills necessary to solve any technological, legal, or social problem. These bodies are one of the most valued companies of all time and have enough resources, money and labor. Companies like Facebook and Google reserves are as large as some nations of the past. Such corporations are hungry for efficiency. They cannot afford to lose profits and hence try the most effective solutions possible while solving a problem. In fact, the efficiency of any given large company can be considered to be even greater than that of a national's government. Historically, governments have been a breeding ground for corruption. This is because the revenue of a government is dependent on tax money, which is relatively stable. A government does not need to compete with others and be efficient. Compare this with companies. Their entire business model has to run efficiently, else they would be immediately gobbled up by a competitor. A government has opposition parties as well, but the effect of these is slower and less brutal and the process of changing a government is much more bureaucratic. Hence, we can establish two things. A. It is technologically possible to rid humanity of poverty. B. Multinational corporations have enough resources to put these plans to use. But why don't these megacorporations help this humanitarian cause? Why does there still exist drastic inequality in society? The reason is that for the companies that operate on paper-thin margins, charity work on such a large scale is hugely unprofitable. The capitalist model of our society rewards the companies that make profits. These companies have a large market share and a steady revenue. There is no incentive to spend additional money in charity work and reduce the profit made. Even if a noble company decides to spend a part of its revenue to help aid a humanitarian cause in another part of the world, there will be inevitable losses in this endeavor. Another greed-dryer company may gobble up the market share of the former. The investors will be wary of this dead-end investment with no returns. Sure, some companies might portray themselves as noble leaders in charitable work for advertising to a younger audience, but that is often much less than what they could provide. The root of this problem is that the companies that have money are not willing to spend it only because the current capitalist model we follow rewards higher profit and not social work. Free market is extremely efficient in keeping products relevant and shaping the market according to supply and demand, but it fails where there is no incentive to generate profit. The free market is ruthless and was never meant to solve social issues of the present day. It is not a model that awards altruism or kindness. Governments are not better at solving such issues as well. The first and foremost duty of a government is to its own citizens. If a government were to pour money in another country as aid, instead of using that capital to invest in its own infrastructure, the government can be easily expected to be voted out in the next elections. This is not only true for democracy. Any government, however noble its ambitions, cannot afford to put the people of other poorer nations in front of their own. They might risk an uprising or a coup if they do so. Hence the two main storehouses of power, governments and multinational corporations, fail to solve the issue of poverty. The steps taken by governments and corporations as aid are too little and too far apart to make a quick impact. Using our current methods, we might alleviate poverty in maybe a couple hundred years, by making small incremental changes. But by then, the inequality gap may rise enough to change the very definition of poverty once again. Poverty arises out of two main situations: inequality, social or wealth, and unemployment. Solutions to unemployment will be discussed in later chapters. Inequality refers to the disparity in the purchasing power of individuals. This can be a result of lower income jobs. Jobs like sulfur mining are infamous for the strenuous work conditions and low income. In the previous section, we have established that labor is subjective. Is sulfur mining less valuable to society than Marka's high-paying software designing job? If yes, is the difference large enough to justify the disparity in their salaries? We have already established that money is nothing but the objective translation of labor. The average income of a sulfur miner is $6 a day. The average salary of a software developer is $75,039/year. Some might argue that since Mark has better education than the sulfur miner, he deserves the higher pay. However, income is measured on the basis of the value an individual provides to a company, and the society. Mark has spent his teenage years specializing in the field of computers. This does not necessarily mean that after he graduates, Mark provides more value to the society than the miner. Mark could afford to go to college only because of the money his parents saved. Maybe the minera's parents had no such privilege. Although this might not be the case every time, the disparity in the life of Mark and the miner is only because of the already existing wealth gap in society. Mark, owing to his love of sandwiches, might just buy $6 worth of cheese sandwiches every day. In that same amount of money every day, the miner must provide for his family and save for his son to pursue education so that he might have a hope for a better life. Furthermore, our capitalist factories run on the foundation of cheap labor. Cut that out of the system and everything suddenly becomes twice as expensive. Thus, we can conclude that the current economic system rewards selfishness. The growing disparity has no solution laid down and continues to increase with each generation. Neither the governments nor the international companies are capable of addressing this issue. An incentive for profit is the bane of altruism. I will discuss wars and peace in a future chapter. Humans being an interplanetary civilization is a fairly common idea. We have been continually researching and exploring the possibility of space travel. Many ideas have been proposed to introduce space tourism and colonization of Mars and the Moon. However, to truly accomplish these feats we need a lot of research. Theoretically, we have several possible ways to achieve this. However, to actually test and conduct trials, we need a lot of funding and time. Government organizations like NASA, JAXA, ESA, CNSA, RFSA, or ISRO currently dominate the space research field. There are private companies like SpaceX as well. However, what all of these organizations are in dire need of is investment. States have other more urgent priorities to dedicate their budget to. Private space companies are a risky investment for any investor. Unlike tech companies that investors love for their high returns, the progress of space research is slow and may result in more failed launches than successful ones. All the theoretical concepts and models we have created to explore space are moot if they never get enough capital to actually put those concepts to practice. The same can be said for other niche and futuristic technologies, genetic engineering, quantum computing, and many others. All these fields are stuck in a loop, where they have all the brilliant scientists in the world to find innovative solutions, but nobody is interested to invest large sums of money in such risky ventures. Asteroid mining is actually possible by the technologies we have today. This has the potential to solve the resource crisis on Earth. We can mine hundreds of trillions of dollars worth of minerals from outer space. However, there is nobody ready to even invest $1 trillion to make this practically possible. Our current economic model discourages such risky and uncertain investments. Why invest hundreds of billions of dollars in space research when you can make more profit by investing in a trusted and proven company in a shorter span of time? Without taking such risks, how can we explore new frontiers? Discouragement of space research only because of the lack of funding is truly a saddening pitfall of our current economic systems. The climate disaster issue will be discussed in a separate chapter. Hoarding. A sense of security is crucial for all humans. The importance of saving money is taught to every child in schools or by their parents. Each individual must have a healthy sum of money ready in case of emergencies. Similarly, we need to save for other reasons like education, weddings, saving to purchase a house, a car, etc. To buy anything that is above a person's means, he must save. Each person has money saved for his/her retirement or even hospitalization. Even funerals of loved ones cost money. Saving money is important for individual security. Compare two $10 bills. One of them is in Mark's bank account and the other is in his wallet. Mark owes his friend Anthony $10, and Anthony owes Josh the same amount. In turn, Josh owes Aosh $10 and Aosh owes Mark the same amount. Mark gives the $10 bill in his wallet to Anthony, who passes it to Josh, who in turn gives it to Aosh. Using the same bill, Aosh repays his debt to Mark. After all these transactions are complete, what just seemed like $10, cycled through the economy and repaid debts worth $40. Money in circulation is inherently better for the economy than money sitting in a bank account. The more the bill circulates and the more transactions it passes through, the more its value to the society. Contrast that with the $10 sitting in Mark's bank account. It has provided no value to society in the same amount of time, and most probably it never will, until Mark decides to put it to use. In fact, the $10 in a savings account may depreciate over time because of inflation. If Mark decides to save for a new house, he must either store money in a savings account or invest in a low-risk fixed deposit, which usually has interest rates just above inflation rates. Individual saving money is actually bad for the economy. The higher the money flow, the more prosperous a region. This is in direct contrast with the individual sense of security that pushes us to save more. This contradicting nature of saving vs spending is another flaw of modern systems. The situation gets even more grim when we consider where all the saved money is located. Who do you think has more money in their bank account, the poor or the rich? International megacorporations or small-scale businesses? Who really needs that money? This again brings up the topic of wealth disparity. As discussed in the above section, this money can be put to better use by helping alleviate poverty or ending starvation. In this way, the money that is being hoarded can be introduced back to the economy. This money would be of more value to society, not only because it is used for a good cause, but also because it would increase cash flow in impoverished regions. Alas, this would never happen with our current profit-driven models. The solution. We have already established that no object or service can be free. We need to pay either using labor or money. We have also established that money is nothing but an objective quantity we use to mark labor, which is a subjective quantity. Using the example of Mark's cheese sandwich, we have seen that all monetary transactions can be dissolved into labor. We have also seen that labor is relative. Mark A's job can fetch less or more money in another company, depending upon their requirement. The monetary value of Mark A's labor cannot be constant. It depends on the value he provides to his employer. We have also seen an example of a sulfur miner, who is paid much less than Mark is. Whose work provides more value to the society, the sulfur miner or Mark S, software engineer? There is no easy answer to this. There are valid arguments for both sides. Mark is only paid more because he has a degree and has invested money in his education. However, the end result of their work is comparable. A world without sulfur miners would probably be just as miserable as a world without software engineers. Then why this income disparity? This is the failure of measuring labor as an objective value. A gold? Yellow, glittering, precious gold? No, gods. Thus much of this will make black white, foul fair. Wrong right, base noble, old young, coward valiant. Ha, you gods! Why this? What this, you gods? Why, this? Will lug your priests and servants from your sides. Pluck stout men's pillows from below their heads. This yellow slave will knit and break religions, bless the accursed. Make the whore leprosy adored, place thieves. And give them title, knee and approbation. With senators on the bench, this is it. That makes the Wapentee widow wed again. Come, damned earth. Thou common whore of mankinda. Shakespeare, Timon of Athens. A money. Nothing worse in our lives, so current, rampant, so corrupting. Money you demolish cities, root men from their homes, you train and twist good minds and set them on to the most atrocious schemes. No limit, you make them adept at every kind of outrage, every godless crimes a money, Sophocles, Antigone. It is a fairly common idea that money is the root of evil. Money has the ultimate power in our society. Everything we do, have done, or will do has revolved around money. The world we live in is ruled by no nation, no man, and no God. Money is what drives the current human society. However, we forget that there is something far superior, which is intrinsic to human nature, labor. The following idea might seem outrageous and absurd to many. Some might even laugh and turn away. However, I will do my best to explain my solution in the following chapters and go in depth about the consequences of my solution. My solution to all these problems is to remove the very root of the issue, money. A society without currency. I am not proposing that we all go back to barbaric times or resort to the barter system. Neither am I some spiritual monk who opposes materialism, nor am I some kind of anarchist. I do believe, however, that labor should not be measured and its value must not be degraded by trying to objectively count it. Chapter 2, The Solution. Let us start with a thought experiment. If you wake up tomorrow and find that every product in the world now costs nothing, what will you do? All products available in the current society will still be available, but their price tag will read, $0. Any car, any high-end laptop, any expensive food dish, or even an entire house for free. A caveat is that the price is going to remain $0 permanently. There will never be a need to buy anything with money. Since this is a hypothetical sudden transition, let us ignore product shortages or other complicated cases. A transition between our current economy and the new one should be a slow one. I will get back to this later. In such an unlikely scenario, a person might simply go on a buying spree. To simplify things, let us consider that he might decide to buy the top 10 best and most expensive cars. As the day progresses and he is about to go book the cars, he realizes that he doesn't really care about all those cars. The only reason he wanted them was because they were expensive and flashy. But he soon comes to the realization that nobody would care about those cars anymore. Everyone can have the same most expensive cars. It won't make him any special if he goes and gets them. His neighbors would do the same and all the uniqueness of his endeavor may fade away. He would rather just go and buy one of those cars instead of 10, that matches his utility. What would he even do with those 10 cars anyway? Using this same philosophy, he might get the latest iPhone and buy a new better laptop. He might be really interested in keeping exotic pets like snakes, but could never afford one. As we scale up this model from one person to the entire society, we can see an improvement in the quality of life. No man, woman, or child can ever go hungry. Everyone has access to the best products. There is no luxury exclusive to the ultra-rich. Everything is now accessible to the rest of the 99% population. Imagine a world where everyone has access to the best quality food and technology. This sounds like a fairy tale, and the wisest of you might already start to see some flaws of this system. I shall address them one by one over the course of this essay. Also note that there will always be people with love for cars. These people might buy 10 cars, not for utility and as means of show-off but for genuine interest. Similarly, there might be people who go overboard with the stuff they love. But that's fine. Passion for things is what makes us human. All the pent-up hobbies that people could never afford would become a reality. I, myself, have a love for fish keeping and aquascaping. These hobbies are, however, really expensive. I would go all out and really cherish this hobby if I could afford everything I want to do. This would make people happier, helping solve the mental well-being issue we are currently facing. Everyone would be happy, doing the things they love. This by no means will cure world depression, but it would certainly help. The world in this thought experiment would be a world with no concept of wealth. This solves everything: wealth inequality, income inequality, poverty, and starvation. We have already discussed how income inequality has no meaning, as labors of two different kinds cannot be compared objectively. We have also discussed how we have the means to end poverty, but we have no incentive to, because poverty alleviation is not a very profitable field to do business in. I shall now do deeper into this hypothetical and discuss how the elimination of money affects other fields. Education. One of the saddest and most influential drawbacks of our current economy is the failure of our education system. We have discussed how we require money for everything, and hence it is an inevitable part of our lives. We have to plan anything and everything only after taking into consideration the most important factor, money. This plan can be a simple beach vacation or one's future plan. Currently, most of us work only to make money. Most students choose fields of study with high demand so that they can get employed with a high salary. Such fields include engineering, law, or medical. Most students have little to no interest in these fields, and yet have to study these if they want to live a life of leisure in the future. Surely, there are many students who really have an avid interest in these fields. However, it is safe to say that most students never study what they have interest in. These interests, which have the potential to turn into professions, often just remain hobbies. Some of these fields are very niche. They might include research on a very specific topic or some kind of an art form. Again, there are some people who find success in the fields of their own interests and pursue those interests as an occupation. However, these people are far and few between. There are two kinds of people who pursue their interests as their occupations. People that are so driven by passion for their art that they are willing to live below the means to pursue their interest. People that have enough money already that they can live lavishly, even without a steady source of income. People in such fields do not get paid a steady income. An artist cannot get a paycheck at the end of every month like an engineer working in a company does. The artist who might have starved for a few months may suddenly make a fortune. There is no stability in this job. Of the two kinds of people discussed above, both are a clear minority. Most people would take the safe route and have a good paying job and rather have their interest at the sidelines than risk their future on it. This also stands true for many low-income jobs. One of these is research. I would like to explain my point better with my own example. As noted above, I have avid interest in aquascaping. This is, however, a very niche hobby. If I were to make this field my full-time profession, it would surely pay less than the current engineering degree I am pursuing as I write this essay. After completing my degree, I would probably get a high-paying job at some IT firm and have a high salary. When I was a kid, I dreamt of doing research in freshwater fish, or microbiology. However, I had two options in front of me: to follow my passion and live on an uncertain income all my life, or to pursue an engineering degree like everybody else and have a steady income. Every student is faced with this decision in their lifetime before college, and most, if not all, students choose the option with a steady income. I do not hate engineering, in any way. Rather, I have started enjoying it and am even good at coding. But, to this day, I still think that I would be a better aquascaper than an engineer. Now scale this example up to a global scale. How many such engineers and doctors do we have that are really good in their respective fields, but could have been better at something else? This is, in my eyes, a very inefficient use of human labor. I can say that I have more technical knowledge about fish than most of the aquarium store owners in this city or even this state. I wasn't taught anything about fish keeping in college. I learned it all on my own. Now imagine the expertise I could have had in said field if I had formal education in fish keeping. This is just one example. There are countless chefs, musicians, dancers, or painters in an engineering class. Some wanted to do research in fields like quantum computing, particle physics, microbiology, aerospace, or string theory. All these people, which might roughly be up to 70% of the class, could have been experts in the fields they like. But instead, for the promise of a steady income, they will be stuck with an average job and might never realize their full potential till the day they die. This inefficiency is not only bad at an individualistic level, but also detrimental to the society as a whole. These waves of lost potential could have discovered new scientific phenomena through their research. There could be musicians or sports people who could have been better entertainers than the stars today. It is often said that education kills creativity. Students are quick to blame schools and colleges for teaching things that they never wanted to learn. However, schools and colleges are not to blame here. They work perfectly. It is not the teacher who is teaching wrong, it is the student who is in the incorrect class. The entire duality that each student faces while planning for their future isn't based on what they like and what colleges can best suit their needs. It is based on what college can give better placements, or what college can make me a better engineer. What is the use of asking this question if the student does not wish to become an engineer? This duality can trace its roots back to the very problem that I addressed earlier: discrimination of labor. Who is to decide that an average engineer working in an average IT firm is more valuable to the society as a whole than a researcher who studies freshwater fish? Hence, we can conclude that the rotten education system of today that produces inefficient skilled laborers is a product of measuring the value of labor with money. Note that there will always be people with passion for engineering. These engineers would be more productive and useful to society than an engineer who has little to no interest in his department. This very thing has led to the oversaturation of the job market, particularly in fields like IT. A good engineer will always be more valuable to any company. Good engineers are usually people with passion in their fields. There is very little overlap between people who have a strong disliking for coding and yet are good programmers. These beta programmers are often the ones that are left unemployed. These same people are labeled as repeaters, failures, or unskilled programmers. I strongly believe that every person has an interest in something. It depends on the environmental factors as a child grows up. Interests are acquired from their surroundings. Exposure to more fields will help the child pick and choose what he likes. Chances are that if the child likes something, he will be more driven to pursue it further. These additional efforts will make him better than the rest. If the child is forced to do something he doesn't like, he will do it with little focus and will inevitably be below average. All the bad programmers we mentioned in the above example are the victims of the system of forcing children to do something that they don't like. This bad programmer could have been an expert pilot, but never had those options to choose from. A pilot and an unemployed engineer both consume the same amount of resources in their lifetime to survive. One of them is extremely valuable to the society and the other is a waste of resources. This isn't true only for engineering. I gave this example only because I have first-hand experience in the field and know what student life on campus is like. I am sure the same is true for other popular high-paying fields. Would you rather have a doctor passionate about his work perform a surgery on you or a doctor who is there only because the job pays well? This inefficiency is completely resolved by the hypothetical we considered at the beginning of this chapter. Any student can become anything he wants. There is no concept of money, hence no income for any job. A kid can learn whatever he wants, without ever facing the dilemma discussed earlier. A painter won't need to worry if he would be able to sell his painting to afford a meal. He can be completely focused on his work, with total artistic freedom without worrying about if it would be sold or not. This would enrich the art that he participates in, probably even introducing new and experimental concepts. This example can be expanded to all professions. Photographers will be passionate about their art, and hence we would find only the best photographs taken by them, with no compromise in equipment, because everything is free of cost. Research in traditionally non-profitable fields will skyrocket. All the megaprojects that were delayed or scrapped due to lack of funds could be built by passionate architects. The implications of this revolution in education will be far and wide. I will touch upon these in almost all the further sections. B. Work. This concept is closely knit with the last section. A very rational school of thought in this hypothetical scenario would be, if everything is free, why bother learning anything? Why bother working if there is no income to be earned? Would this society slowly revert back to a primitive stage? A. To these questions, my answer is simple. In his entire lifetime, man does the following three primary activities: learn, work, produce labor, consume, labor or products of labor. Out of these, learning takes up at least 20 years of a man's life, work at least another 30 or 40. Consumption is an auxiliary activity done from the day of birth to death. All three of these are necessary for the physical, mental, and social well-being of an individual. There are many uneducated people that start working at a much earlier age. However, these people fall under the category of menial labor, which will be covered in a different section altogether. In the case of menial labor, the learning part can be as short as a few days. However, no occupation can be done intrinsically without learning. For now we will consider an average person, who has college education and is working a middle-income job. If we take out the first two primary activities, the only thing left is consumption. The argument to my hypothetical was that in such a scenario, all men would just consume and not learn or work. However, I would like to argue that this is against the very core of what makes us human. There is no person on earth that only consumes and willingly doesn't work or learn. There are people in our society right now that are unemployed. There are beggars and thieves that provide no value to the society as a fruit of their labor. However, I would like to point out that no man wants to willingly become a beggar or thief. They do so because of lack of money, which isn't present in our hypothetical in the first place. Unemployment is also directly related to lack of education or illiteracy. In a world where education is free and a person can learn whatever he wants to without worrying about his future income, why won't anyone learn? They can simply skip the classes that they are disinterested in and learn whatever they have interest in. By the time a child completes primary education, which can be regarded as one of the basic needs, most of the time the child has a clear idea of what kind of work or education they want to pursue. If a child wants to become an astronaut, he can learn whatever he needs to and has interest in. He can take physics and math classes that he would enjoy, because that's what he wants to learn and ultimately work in. If someone wants to make the planet more sustainable, they can work in the energy sector and further research in solar or tidal energy. If someone wants to code websites and apps, he can choose to take computer science. To some extent these mirage of choices is present even today, but not very efficient as mentioned in the last section. As these barriers are removed, more and more people will learn about things they like. People might want to become a football player or soft drink taster. It doesn't matter as long as they provide some kind of value to society. The value of a football player as an entertainer cannot be compared to the value of an astronaut. In this hypothetical world, every kind of occupation has the same value, which can be considered infinite or zero. Would there still be people who would learn nothing and that wanted to work? Absolutely. Will the number be a majority? Absolutely not. What would a person do if not work? People cannot live happily without a purpose assigned to their lives. With nothing to do, there will only be boredom. What will this unemployed and uneducated man do all day? Roam about the neighborhood in his Rolls-Royce? Watch TV? Eat? How bored would he get if he serves no purpose in society? How could he live with himself? There would be an impending burden on him that he is of no use to society, but is merely a parasite that leeches off others' work. He will look around and see his neighbors happily doing the work they love. He would wonder if he truly has no such passion. How long would he survive like this? A couple of years? A decade? Wouldn't such a person eventually be ridden with boredom and improve himself? Is it even possible for a person to have a disinterest in anything and everything? Another type of unemployed people might travel the world, or dedicate themselves to spirituality or philosophy. I would argue that these people do add value to the society via their experiences and knowledge. The wisdom of such people can be revolutionary if compiled and studied. Hence, in this hypothetical world, everyone would work the same as they do now. The only difference is that there would be almost no unemployment. The wage gap and inequality issue has already been solved. This solves the two largest problems that humanity currently faces. Everyone would not only learn what they want, but also work in the field that they want. In this way their contribution to society would be much greater than the inefficient system of today. People with passion for the work they do is a very powerful force which is not to be disregarded. Almost all discoveries and inventions would not have been possible without such passionate people. An exception to all of this is menial labor, which includes work that nobody wants to willingly do, garbage collection, cleaning services, hazardous jobs, unskilled repetitive work. All this will be covered separately in detail. What my theoretical world is based on is already present in our society, although, in an indirect manner. We discussed in the first chapter how all transactions are divided into three categories. We also concluded that all transactions are indirectly just labor transactions. Money acts as a middleman. Money is used to quantify labor and divide its value into smaller denominations. However, as we discussed, there is no need to quantify the value of labor. Labor is abstract and subjective. No two types of labors can be compared. We cannot say that an hour spent on designing a website is equal to 3 days of sulfur mining. However, that is exactly what money does as a middleman. In the new hypothetical system, there is no such discrimination based on the type of labor. All men and women work in some way or the other. In exchange they consume goods produced by others. If an artist paints 3 paintings a month, he contributes to society in his own way, via his labor. Nobody should have the right to decide what an artist can and cannot consume based on his labor. Painting is an extremely subjective form of labor. Why should anyone else decide what the artist's contribution to society is? That is exactly what money does. If a potter wants one of his pots decorated with some beautiful painting, he could hire this artist to do the work for him. On what basis would the potter decide how much to pay him? There is no rightful and just way to quantify the value that the painter has provided to the potter via his work, labor. In turn, a potter may give him a pot to use. This pot too cannot have a pricea assigned to it. Its value could be infinite or zero. The labor of neither the painter and the potter can be objectified. Thus, the potter may give a pot in exchange to the artist. Sounds familiar? This is the barter system. But isn't this a very primitive way to exchange goods? Didn't we already discuss the drawbacks of the barter system? What I am getting at is not a barter system. Let us reimagine the scenario. The painter paints a beautiful scenery on the potter's pot and leaves without taking anything in return. The potter then goes ahead and gives it to a farmer who uses it to store his grain. The potter gets nothing in return. The farmer then harvests his field and gives a part of his grain to both the potter and the painter, in the same painted pots. The farmer, potter, and the artist, all provide value to the society. Now this is a very rudimentary example and a highly unlikely scenario in the modern world. However, it helps us to understand how this community of three people can function solely based on indirect labor transactions. In this scenario, no money has been used. Money would do no good but overcomplicate these transactions. The artist will demand more money for his hard work and the potter will tend to refuse, because he needs to sell them at a profit to the farmer. The farmer may completely opt out and use plain pots instead of painted ones to save money and maximize his profit, possibly putting the artist out of work. When money is added to this small community, the focus shifts from making the best paintings, or pots or the best grains to making mediocre paintings that fetch a fair price, making non-durable pots so that the farmer would need to buy more. The farmer too would have less incentive to make quality crops and would focus on quantity that he can sell and profit from. Note that even if the artist is extremely passionate about his art, it is directly against his interest to make excellent quality paintings. The potter wouldn't care if the artist spent 6 hours or 1 hour on a painting. He certainly wouldn't pay 6 times as much for the former. As soon as we introduce money to the system, we are left with poorly painted pots that are brittle and low-quality grains. This, I believe, is the current state of society. Note that the scenario would stay the same even if the potter hires another painter or the farmer changes his pot vendor. The solution is the former scenario, where all the three men do what they do best, in exchange for nothing. The artist will make extremely intricate art, not for money, but because he likes to paint. A factor that prevents the artist from doing lazy work, is the fact that the potter might just choose another artist to paint his pots. Hence, it is in the best interest of the artist to make the best paintings. The situation is the same for the potter. Why be a potter that makes brittle pots that are prone to breakage if there is no lust for money? Nobody would buy pots from a potter who makes inferior pots, especially if they could just walk to another vendor and buy better quality pots for the same price, free. Note that my use of the word free isn't accurate. Nothing can be free. All of the three pay for all the goods using their own labor in their own fields. This model can be scaled up to our current world. It can be hard to grasp this concept. After all, every person cannot consume everything. The truth is that they don't need to. As a society, we are sophisticated enough to understand that every person works and his work is impactful to other people around him. The type of this impact can differ a lot. The impact that a musician makes on society is totally different than the impact of a person who works in airplane manufacturing. Even if the musician has never sat in an airplane or the airplane manufacturer has never listened to the musician's music, both have worked. This labor may not be utilized directly by the exchanging party, but it has been consumed by some person somewhere on earth. All labor eventually trickles down. As long as every person works in the domain of their interest, they have fulfilled their duty towards the society. No other person can judge if the musician's music is more valuable than the airplane manufacturer's. As a reward for this labor, they must have access to the labor of every other individual, without paying any fee. This concept removes the very idea of an exchange-based transaction system. In this interconnected world with an ever-growing infinite amount of information, this transaction-based system is unnecessary. Nobody must exchange money or any form of currency for anything. If we try to imagine such a world, it would be perfectly balanced. All individuals work, not for a fixed salary or income, but because of their passion for work. They work to contribute towards society as a whole and not for any selfish motive. All labor in the world is interconnected. The following diagram helps illustrate my point. In this diagram, we see an interconnected system, not unlike our current world. Observe that all the individuals, A, B, C, D and E perform their individual tasks. Observe that D never sits in an airplane and yet gives away displays for free to A. Same condition is observed for E. D gives away displays to E without getting anything in return, neither money nor direct labor. However, D listens to the music created by B without giving him anything in return. B uses a smartphone that E produces, using DA's display technology. E also listens to B. E eats at CA's restaurant. C, in turn, flies using AAS aircraft. AAS aircraft uses DA's screen technology. Thus, as we can see, all the one-way transactions made are interconnected in the form of a web. A never listens to BA's music. B never eats at CA's restaurant. However, their labor trickles down the web via D in the first case and E in the second case. If A decides to listen to BA's music or if B decides to fly in an airplane, they both should be able to do it without any additional payment, as they have already contributed to the web using their skill. In a regular scenario, in today's world, this same A trickling down effect is observed with money. At each transaction, money is exchanged to quantify the amount of labor consumed, an abstract concept that cannot be accurately measured without causing misery. At the state that our civilization is in, we can do away with all the currency exchanges. As long as every person contributes to the society, we can carry on our daily lives, working in our own domains. B shouldn't mind if A starts listening to his songs one day. This is because the labor of B is linked to A, BDA or BECA. B can go and start eating at CA's restaurant whenever he wishes to because their labor is also chained together, BEC or CEB or BDAC or BDEC. As we keep adding more links to this graph, the chains keep getting longer. The chains, however, can never break. This is because there is almost no population of Earth that is completely isolated. All labor eventually trickled down the economy. If everyone, directly or indirectly, consumes the labor of every individual, then why bother to keep track of the transactions and add unnecessary bottlenecks in the form of unaffordability? The web, society, is most efficient and free when there is no obstruction to the flow of consumption of labor. People can choose to consume any product without any restrictions. No person can consume everything. Hence, this system is far from barter. This is a more sophisticated system based on free trade and globalization. With zero restrictions on the consuming power of the individuals, we can create a perfectly efficient system where everyone works in exchange for nothing and everyone consumes in exchange for nothing. See manufacturing. From the examples given above, we can conclude that the quality of goods produced will also grow. This is because of two reasons. The passion of the producers that make the goods. In part due to the better educational freedom. There is no incentive to produce inferior goods for profit. Both of these are only possible due to the abolition of money in this hypothetical society. Why make a bad product if there is no cost restraint? Let us consider a phone company, Apple. The main goal of Apple in this new world is not to make money, but to make superior phones because all the employees in that company are passionate about making a superior product. Since everything is free, nothing stops them from sourcing the best materials for making their phones and making absolutely zero compromises. The phone that they can make will be a technological marvel. This phone will be accessible to everyone. What would differentiate one company from another? Company philosophy. It is widely known that Samsung makes foldable phones, but Apple is yet to dabble in their business. It is not because they cannot or don't have the funds to. It is simply a difference in philosophy. Samsung believes that the future is foldable and Apple sticks to the tried and trusted form factor of smartphones. Some people prefer these futuristic-looking foldable devices and some prefer Apple's traditional phones that are regarded as good quality. These devices also retail at comparable prices. So there will not be any company that will be a monopoly. In fact, this system prevents the formation of monopolies in the first place. There will be no barrier to entry in any industry. There will be no money needed to enter any industry. There can be infinite competition. The competition will not be based on any form of compromise, but who makes the superior product. People would still buy phones from different companies, due to differences in philosophy as mentioned above. Everyone will have access to the best smartphones. This model is in no way restricted to smartphones or electronics. This exact effect can be observed in all the industries, from sewing machines to cars. Why produce an inferior car when you can produce the very best? Many people will raise eyebrows and ask, what about sustainability? If everyone started buying everything, do we have enough resources to sustain this new society? Sustainability and future. One study estimates it would take 5 Earths to support the human population if everyone's consumption patterns were similar to the average American. If we think about it, in this new world, every person will be a lot better off than an average American. How do we sustain this demand for high-quality goods? The answer is simple: space. Asteroid mining is something that is theoretically possible with our current technology. This, however, is an extremely expensive feat, which may cost billions or even trillions of dollars. Due to the same reason, there are no minerals mined currently from outer space. However, we know for a fact that outer space is rich with precious minerals. These minerals can be used to support the growing consumer demand for high-quality materials. In a society with no concept of money, there is nothing to stop ambitious space companies from developing extraterrestrial mining operations. Apart from this, the space industry would boom. The next frontier for humans is undoubtedly space. If we remove the very concept of a payment, there is nothing stopping us from developing space technologies at an exponential rate. Space industry is a very glamorous field. There will surely be no shortage of young minds trying to enter the industry. In our current world, the aerospace industry is a niche field that very few engineers work for. The main 2 reasons for this is that the chances of getting hired by a reputable space agency is very low, because of budget constraints, and a lack of private players. Private companies are the ones that drive any industry forward. Government space agencies today serve the purpose of research bodies. Apart from near-orbit missions, it is extremely expensive to launch spacecraft into outer space. It is not something that many companies could afford. However, as soon as we remove this barrier, and all the parts and components required to manufacture a spacecraft are available to the general public, there will soon be a storm of startups dedicated to exploring space and making humans an interplanetary civilization. This can be seen to some extent in our current society with companies like SpaceX. Imagine what such a company could do on an essentially infinite budget. This is not only true for the space industry. Fields that have been traditionally sidelined due to their high cost and experimental nature, like quantum computing or genetic engineering, will be studied more. That is because these fields are more interesting to many students. With no worry for income disparity in these research fields, there will be a plethora of new developers and researchers that can help guide us to the future. There will also be millions of job opportunities available in these fields, as traditional occupations like banking cease to exist. As the finance industry collapses, the roots of all evil in society cease to exist. This newfound manpower can be used in the industrial sector or any other numerous fields. We will have more entertainers, innovators, or researchers. People working in the finance sector contribute nothing to the society that improves the standard of living. Surely, in today's society they play a very vital role. The world's economy would not exist without economics. Without banks, there will be no credit granted, directly putting an end to large investments. However, all these systems are not necessarily essential for human survival. Humans can do without complications. My system eliminates the need for currency, making all these jobs absolute. After all, who needs bankers when everything is free? Another important cornerstone of sustainable development is to control the climate disaster. The use of fossil fuels in manufacturing, transportation, and energy production are the leading causes for global warming. We exploit fossil fuels for only one reason: they are cheap. Energy generation: coal is cheaper than building renewable power plants. Governments cannot afford to sustain their entire populations on renewable energy. We already have the technology to build huge solar power plants that can harness the sun's energy and sustain large populations. This energy can be stored for later use. It is possible to build enough solar, hydroelectric, tidal, geothermal, or wind farms that can sustain the entire human population. These methods, although eco-friendly, are often extremely expensive to implement. A current trend that we are observing is the electrification of many sectors that have traditionally run directly using fossil fuels. From electric cars to heaters, the trend is moving towards electricity. If it is possible to instantaneously switch from using non-renewables to renewables, there has to be a drastic step taken. In our current society, this is not possible without a major reform in our economic system. In the hypothetical society, there will be no need to use non-renewables. There is no concept of a cheaper energy source. Furthermore, as our educational focus shifts from higher ability, students will dedicate themselves to research in these fields. There will surely be more students who would want to figure out new ways to increase the efficiency of renewable sources than adamant students who insist on use of fossil fuels. Nobody is born wishing to destroy the planet. We do it for purely economic reasons. The very root of this issue will cease to exist after this new system is put into place. Why opt for non-renewables when renewables are available just as easily? As research in more efficient ways to harness energy grows, we will soon turn towards space yet again. We might build megastructures like the Dyson sphere, which are nothing but theoretical concepts today. If we continue on the current trajectory, there is no way the climate issue can ever be adequately addressed in time. Even if the entire developed world switches to renewable sources of energy, there will still be developing and underdeveloped nations that rely on non-renewables. In our current society, there is no incentive for companies to shift to more expensive sources, except perhaps public image. Nuclear energy is a midterm solution, but it is nowhere as safe as the true renewables and still generates nuclear waste. This can be translated to the adoption of expensive eco-friendly technologies. If a Tesla is available at the same price as a Toyota Corolla, who would buy a Corolla? It is often said that the future of transportation is inevitably electric. The mass adoption is slowed by the hefty price tag of electric vehicles. As soon as these price tags disappear, there is nothing stopping people from adopting more eco-friendly alternatives. The demand for gasoline cars will surely fall to a great extent, although it might never truly reach zero. Another issue for electric vehicles is the lack of standardization of charging networks. This is, however, not a social or economic issue. This can be simply resolved by passing a bill mandating standardization of charging technologies. Thus, as soon as the concept of money ceases to exist, the cheaper traditional energy options available will no longer seem attractive to businesses and younger generations. These traditional sources are detrimental to the health of the planet and hence have to be put into check immediately. In our current system, there is no way to change the dependence on fossil fuels. The climate disaster can be deterred only by taking such drastic steps. Psychology. If such a society were to become a reality, it would essentially be an utopian dream. A world with no starvation or poverty. A world where scientific inquiry and arts are encouraged and all people are happy to work in a field that they are passionate for. It would be a world where there is no concept of materialistic greed. There would be no incentive for megacorporations to act against human interest. Sustainability would be achievable. Corruption will cease to exist. There will be a new renaissance, where the focus of the society shifts from making and hoarding money to communally thinking about the prosperity of the entire human race. Cheap and inferior quality goods would never be manufactured. Human civilization might grow and expand to outer space. Such a society is an achievable dream. Only if we let go of the concept of currency, human society will truly prosper. Once we come to understand the role of an individual in society and the concept of the altruistic transaction saw that I explained earlier in this chapter, we will transcend all the virtual barriers that obstruct our growth as a species. Every man, woman, or child must be taught about these indirect labor transactions and the interconnected web of labor. There is no need to use currency to keep track of these subjective transactions. If such a society were to become a reality, there would be a sharp drop in depression and mental health-related issues. As living conditions improve and there is unrestricted access to every material object present, poverty-induced mental effects will disappear. How happy would the people of such a world be if they worked a job they loved and had access to all the pleasures of life? There will be a sharp decline in crime. Burglary, ransom demands, or murders for monetary gain will be obsolete. In a society with better education and no poverty, half of all crimes will never happen. Hence, if such a system were to be implemented, there will be an undeniable improvement in the mental health of individuals. Chapter 3, Governance and Politics. The field of politics will be totally unrecognizable after this switch. Politics and economics go hand in hand. The basic structure of how governments operate will be changed irreversibly. Many might see my views on the second chapter as anarchist theories. However, a distinct difference is that in my system, the government must play a vital role. Peace and harmony cannot exist in my system without any form of controlling body. This is the wall that separates my theory from anarchist models. I believe that government interference in some fields is necessary. However, the role of governments is vastly different. I believe that the more power the government holds, the more the country is likely to collapse. This is because mismanagement by one body can ruin decades of progress. This is not true for the private sector. As multiple parties are involved in an industry, a misstep by one company cannot be as harmful to the society. Other companies in the domain will be quick to act and correct the inefficiency. To correct an inefficient government policy, however, one has to wait for the next round of elections in a democratic system. Government processes are unnecessarily bureaucratic. Democracy gives a nation longevity. It may not always be the best and most efficient way to roll out policies, but it is undeniably the most stable. Authoritarian societies are like firecrackers, that burn hot and with a bang, but are short-lived. This is because the true power of any nation is not its party, king, or dictator, but the people that make the nation. People, if kept unhappy for a long period of time, revolution of any kind, is the end of stability and a nightmare for business. This is true for not only internal stability, but also external. Nobody seeks to invest in a nation that seeks unrest and war. In the globalized world of today, unnecessary aggression can do more harm than good. Hence, free economies that are stable and conducive to business are the most prosperous. These nations are almost always democratic. Democracy is the best way to ensure internal cooperation. It can be compared to a slow-burning candle. The flame might not always be as hot and loud, but it is peaceful. Democracy distributes the power of a government back to its people. Democracy and free trade are policies that keep the power of the government in check and enable global cooperation and prosperity. Free and unrestricted trade brings more power to the private sector. This increases the efficiency of the system. F. Elections. Not all democracies are created equal. There are some forms of democracies that are more efficient than others. In our current democratic system, there are many flaws. All the world's democracies either have a two-party system, or are slowly headed towards one. Let us illustrate this with an example. Consider 5 political parties, A, B, C, D and E. A is a leftist party, E a right-wing and C are centrists. B might be leftist moderate and implement some right policies and C might be moderately right, borrowing some leftist policies. Consider a sample set of 100 people. In the first voting round, everyone votes for their favorite parties and each gets a 20% vote. Nobody has the majority. The left centrists fear that if the right centrists jump to the E party, there will be a right-wing government. The right centrists fear that if votes of Party B were to jump ship to A, there would be a left-wing government. Due to this fear, the voters of B and D parties vote for the extremist parties. This is often encouraged by the extremist parties by preaching propaganda. In the second round, we can see that both parties A and E have 40% of the votes and the purely centrist party, C, has just 20%. They find that they have no hope of ever winning the election and slowly, the voters of C migrate towards either A or E. The C party will soon find itself severely underfunded and disappear to obscurity. Hence, we are left with a two-party system. Of course, in real elections, there will always be a preferred candidate, so the results are rarely ever exactly 50-50. In another more realistic example, let us consider the following vote count for the first round. A, 25%. B, 21%. C, 12%. D, 16%. E, 26%. In this case, the clear winner of the election is E, as the candidate has the majority. Over time, the voters start uniting. A, 42%. B, 3%. C, 14%. D, 2%. E, 39%. In this case, the extreme parties have secured even more votes, not because more people agree with extreme ideologies, but because of fear that the other voters might vote for an undesirable candidate. This grows over time. A, 46%. B, 0%. C, 9%. D, 0%. E, 45%. In the third year, parties B and C now cease to exist due to low voter count and underfunding, even though they were clearly more preferable to the general public than C. The voters of C slowly realize that their party cannot win and slowly start migrating to either A or B. Hence, we get a two-party system, where A and B win, not because they are desired by 40% people, but because they run propaganda based on fear against each other, trying to lure the centrist parties and ensure that they do not migrate to the other extremist party. We are left with two parties trying to win by a weak margin. A, 49%. B, 0%. C, 0%. D, 0%. E, 51%. After years of the two-party system, what if another party decides to show up? Let us consider that the party C has been magically revived, and offers people a moderate option. This would surely be good for the right-wing voters, right? Now they have more available options to choose from. Let us see what happens in this scenario. A, 49%. B, 0%. C, 0%. D, 10%. E, 41%. Now, in the last election, even though most of the people support right-wing ideologies to some extent, the left-wing candidate is the winner. This is because either of the right parties fail to get a majority. This even incentivizes A to fund and donate Party C. The candidate of Party A knows that introduction of C will lead to his victory. The more votes C gets, the better it is for A. This is called the spoiler effect. This is effectively the state of our current democratic system. We are stuck with two parties that spread propaganda and hate against the other party to win. This duopoly is harmful to society as nobody gets what they really want and people vote based only on what they think others would do. As donations to the successful parties, A and E, continue to increase and they have more backing, this problem only becomes more permanent. How can this duopoly be prevented? The answer is single transferable votes, STV. This form of democracy is superior to our current systems. Instead of voting only for one party, the voters list their favored candidates in increasing order. Let us consider our first scenario. A. 25%. B. 21%. C. 12%. D. 16%. E. 26%. Here, it is clear that voters for the C party cannot win. But as voters of C party have given a preference list, we can assume that the centrist voters that voted for C prefer the moderate parties over A or E. So with C out of the competition, we can assign their voters their second priority. A. 25%. B. 27%. D. 22%. E. 26%. Now we observe that B is actually the majority. The votes of the losing party D are transferred next. The voters for D naturally prefer the extreme right over A or B. A. 25%. B. 27%. E. 48%. The votes of the losing party A are now transferred to their next best choice, B. B. 52%. E. 48%. Here, we can see that the election has yielded a much more fair result. The moderate leftists are winners not because more people voted for them, but because they were the preferred candidate overall by the losing parties. If we were to declare E the winner, like in the current scenario, only because E had more votes, we are ignoring the opinions of all the other voters that actually preferred some other candidate. In our second example, if we consider the spoiler effect scenario. A. 49%. B. 0%. C. 0%. D. 10%. E. 41%. The voters of D would naturally prefer E over A. Hence, if D were to lose, they would like to transfer their votes back to E. This would yield the proper result of the right-wing party having the 51% majority. Hence, we have observed that the STV model is superior to the current voting mechanism. It guarantees better voter satisfaction. This model promotes stability in a nation. People are less likely to revolt or hold strikes if their second or third best candidate is elected. This is in contrast to the current, winner-takes-all system. A voter is either happy that his party won, or is discontent that the party he hates is now in power. G. Political campaigns. If we combine this effect with our new labor-based economy, we get a beautiful result. No longer can people be manipulated by tax cuts and monetary incentives to gain more votes. The voters must vote based purely on ideology. Even though we use these terms in the above examples, the terms like left and right politics will no longer exist. This is because there would be no such thing as a right or left economy. There is no money, hence, there is no import and export duty, there is no tax, there is no fiscal policy to base campaigns over. Instead there would be campaigns with social agendas. There will be some governments that are more conservative and there will be some with more liberal policies. People may unite over social issues over economic ones. Economic issues are deemed important, only because we have created them. In nature, there is no recession and hyperinflation. If there is no concept of money, the focus shifts towards more important issues. These include policies to curb climate change, campaigns against racism or casteism, education, allocation of resources and menial labor, the justice system, healthcare, and conservation of culture. Political parties may even hold campaigns based on different philosophies and religions. But isn't religion in politics bad? I will discuss this later in a separate section. Justice, law enforcement, protection, and menial labor. Every government must care for its people. The police, judiciary, military, and emergency services must all come under the government. This also includes disaster relief. Transportation and infrastructure building and maintenance must fall under the government. These are common resources used by all the different companies and individuals. Governments can effectively allocate manpower and incentivize different sectors. Policing, military and emergency services could be carried out as volunteer-based services, full-time occupations, or a combination of both. Infrastructure development can be handled by a committee that hires external contractors. For public transport, the state can purchase carriages from automobile companies based on what best fits the utility. Another important resource that governments must control is menial labor. These include dangerous jobs like mining or unskilled jobs that nobody is interested in, like cleaning, garbage collection, unskilled assembly work, etc. Nobody does menial labor by choice. In ancient times, this hard and dangerous work was done by slaves and servants. In some places, a caste system was put in place. People at the bottom of the social hierarchy were exploited. In today's world, discrimination based on birth is totally unacceptable. We no longer have a hierarchy based on birth. Instead, our social hierarchy is currently based on wealth. At the bottom of this pyramid are the workers who are exploited as cheap labor. These people are paid extremely low wages and often exposed to dangerous environments. These people rarely have any means to escape the poverty trap. They are uneducated and do not have the means to change their situation. Our society runs on these exploited workers. Nobody desires this work, but it has to be done by somebody. So who will do this work in a society without poverty and illiteracy? The answer is criminals. The rate of crime in our new society is already less. There is no money to be stolen. These criminals, however, are ones that indulge in non-materialistic crimes. These may include people who murder out of spite or jealousy, pedophiles, rapists, sadists, human traffickers, etc. These kinds of crimes have been in human society ever since the dawn of civilization. No amount of education can completely eradicate the concept of crime in human society. Even if these crimes can be reduced, they can never be completely halted. The human condition is such that there will always be some people that crave violence and unrest. It is unrealistic to assume that all crime can be eradicated. These people currently reside in prisons and jails all around the world. There they consume resources, food, water, and space. These people do not work. They are consumption machines. In our society, this is the worst scenario possible. The existence of these people in prisons is inefficient. Exorbitant amount of money is poured into maintenance of these prisons. Keeping criminals in prisons is bad for the society as a whole. The solution that I present to this is that these criminals are to do all the menial labor. Dangerous and unkilled work that nobody wants to do but is essential for society. This would be done under supervision. The government controls the allocation of this criminal labor. They could be used as construction workers, cleaners, garbage collectors, or miners. The government could lease out these criminals to companies that can exploit them. This practice may sound cruel, but currently the people exploited for such labor are innocent people. In the new society, the people at the bottom of this social hierarchy will be criminals. These people deserve to be exploited, unlike the people that we have been exploiting for thousands of years. There will be no discrimination based on race or caste. A criminal is a criminal, and his labor will be controlled and leased by the government. Some people are in favor of the death sentence. I have a very logical argument for this. If a criminal is 24 years of age, he would have spent the first 20 years of his life as an unproductive student. Education is important, but only if it produces the desired output of labor. If an educated person refuses to work, he would be wasting the 20 years' worth of resources he has consumed. The same could be said for the death sentence. Even if the 24-year-old criminal deserves to die, he should not be allowed to waste the 20 years' worth of resources that he has consumed. He must work to pay for those resources. Death sentence to a criminal would do more harm to society than good. The criminal would die a happy man, having paid for none of the resources he consumed in his lifetime. The ultimate punishment for him is exploiting his strength by making him do unwanted work. After the criminal has passed an age where he could do any productive work and has grown old, he must be killed. The sentence would of course be different for different degrees of crime. The need for unskilled labor exceeds the number of criminals. For this, the rest of the tasks could be automated. Humans have always dreamt of a future where all the uninteresting mundane work could be done by robots and humans would essentially be free of physical labor. This dream is achievable. With more research in these fields, new technologies would soon emerge that could replace the need for menial work by humans. The field of automation is attractive to new students, and hence, will see a lot of growth. No innocent person should be forced to do something he dislikes in any situation. Every innocent person must be free and the master of his own labor. He should be able to choose whatever field, company, or place he wants to work at. Criminal labor, however, must be controlled and regulated by government officials to keep a track of them at all times and see to it that they are serving their sentence. Natural resource allocation. Natural resources are common goods that must not belong to any individual, company or company. Nobody should be able to own the things that are free in nature and available to all. The natural resources that are essential for human survival must not be owned by any individual. In the new system, if a natural resource like water was purchasable, an individual might try to claim all of it, with no fee to be paid. This is absurd. Air, water, forests, mines, and land are all public goods. They must never be purchasable as they are equally essential to all human beings. The allocation of these free natural resources must be the job of the government. The government too does not own these natural resources, however, are responsible for effective and fair allocation of said resources. Private companies cannot be given this job, as the private sector is by its very nature competitive at each step. There cannot exist monopolies that have the control of all the Earth's resources. The power of allocation of resources must be overseen by the people, and by extension, the democratic government. The government must effectively and fairly allocate these resources to companies. For instance, the government could license a company to build a dam on a river. The river is a common body that belongs to the people of the nation. It is owned by neither the company nor the governing party. If another company tries to build a dam, the government must carefully study the competing parties and grant the permit accordingly. The government must settle disputes and avoid conflicts over these resources. The same thing could be said for mines. The government does not own the land on which the mine is built, and neither does the company. However, the government has power to grant and take away the rights to build and extract minerals from that mine. Similarly, for any forest that falls under the national's boundaries, the government can decide policies regarding it. They can grant the rights to extract resources from the forest to a conservation group or a timber company. It depends on what the people of the nation need. The government itself cannot mine the lands or fish the waters. The government must only mediate disputes and claims of other companies. If the government was allowed to extract the resources, it could only grant itself the permission to use these resources. It would lead to a corrupt and failed state, with an absence of the private sector. The private sector would make a better and more efficient use of the available resources, than any governing body could. The government must only see to it that the resources are put to fair use. The government should be able to take away these rights and grant them to another company, if they suspect any kind of wrongdoing. Another one of these resources is land, and by extension the housing sector. In our new economic system, the aspect of ownership is a little blurry. If there is no money, and every person is free to live anywhere he wants, we run into a problem. What if every person tries to claim thousands of miles of land? What if a person tries to claim an entire city? For this very issue, it is essential to understand that land is a natural resource, like air or water. The productive value of land determines its value in currency. A fertile acre of land is more valuable than land in the middle of an arid desert. A plot of land in Silicon Valley is more valuable than, say, a plot of land in Marne, Iowa. What if a single farmer were to claim the entire fertile plains of India? With no concept of money, this should be possible, right? What if every farmer comes up with the same idea and tries to claim this land? Unlike manufactured goods, this fertile field cannot be manufactured with uniformity. There is no piece of land exactly identical to it. If every farmer in the world tries to buy the same model of a John Deere tractor, he should theoretically be able to. Tractors can be manufactured in large numbers. The same cannot be said for a plot of land. Similarly, what if a single 20-year-old decides to buy 1,000 houses in a city? Wouldn't this cancel out all the progress we have made to achieve sustainability? We would be left with 999 empty houses that are of no use. These 999 houses could instead be used by other individuals. What about the space that is wasted in a city with these 999 empty houses? Roads would have to extend to each of these houses, making transit time unbearable. Such a purchase would be a waste of resources. To counter this very issue, the housing market must be regulated by the government. Land is a natural resource and nobody should be able to own it. The rights to this land, however, can be allocated by a neutral body. This body is the government. Note that the land does not belong to the government. The government merely has the task of allocating the land as per fair use. There is no reason for a single bachelor to live in a house with more than 7 bedrooms. Houses aren't even a measure of wealth in society anymore. Anybody could claim such a house. For this reason, the government must regulate who gets to live where. The government must operate all of the housing market, allocating new houses, migration, reallocation of old houses with adequate repairs, demolition of old and dangerous property, construction of new houses, etc. via third-party companies. The government cannot own or build all of the houses. The government should be in charge of city planning and zoning restrictions, but the actual construction must be done via third-party contractors. The government can choose what contractors and architects to hire to build these new houses. The government must also provide them with the required menial labor, in case of construction. The space in cities is sparse and more valuable than a suburb. If a person works in the city, and applies to the government for housing, the government might give him 2 options: to settle for a 5-bedroom bungalow in the suburbs or a 2-bedroom apartment in the city. This is a more realistic choice than if the individual was made to choose on his own. If every person wanted to live in a 5-bedroom bungalow in the heart of the city, it would lead to an extremely inefficient use of space. Naturally, the government cannot ask anyone to give up rights to the house once they have been granted. These rights, however, would no longer be applicable to criminals. In case of a disaster, the victims must be given rights to new equivalent property. In case of an infrastructure megaproject, the government can ask, but not force all the residents to give up their houses. All these other improvements in the quality of life would be more than that in the housing category. There would be no homeless people, but the general quality of housing would stay relatively the same, if not a bit better. In our new world, everyone could have the world's best cars or computers. This would be sustainable to some extent due to the technological innovations as mentioned in the above chapter. However, if every person decides to build himself a palace, that is absurd and cannot be permitted. The same could be said for commercial land. Land for factories and warehouses of private companies must be allocated by the government for fair use. This would avoid a situation where a handful of companies claim land for warehouses all over the world. Religion. Many people say that the influence of religion in politics is a bad thing. It is not my place to say if religion in politics is a bad thing or a good one. But the reality is that, for thousands of years, religion and politics have been virtually indistinguishable. The concept of secular nations is relatively new. In secular nations too, religion does play an important role, especially during elections. We still hear echoes of millions of people wanting a Hindu Rashtra or an Islamic Caliphate. In the West, we are seeing a resurgence of alt-right conservative Christians. How did we get here? People are free to choose their own beliefs. There is nothing wrong in following a religion. Each person chooses a set of beliefs and abides by these principles. Religions can be considered as schools of philosophy with rules. Every man must believe in some philosophy. Lifting weights is exercise for the muscles, but philosophy is exercise for the mind. Belief in something is a part of what makes us human. This philosophy may not necessarily be religion, it may be some political ideology, or the words of some famous philosopher. This belief can even be something as unique as the teachings of one's own parents or teachers. Any person can start his own school of philosophy. People, in different ages of time, have followed many different schools of thought, predominantly religion, but also schools of thought like Stoicism, Buddhism, Confucianism, Taoism, and even nihilism. People might not even realize that they follow these schools of thoughts. People may create their own bubble, combining teachings from different sources. Every person believes in some set of accepted behaviors or morals that he has deemed correct. People's opinion on different issues might be different because of these different individual schools of thought. Religion is primarily a set of beliefs that a community follows. Some religions focus more on the spiritual and philosophical aspect, which some lean more heavily towards law. This stands true for all religions. There are two major types of religions in the world, Abrahamic and spiritual/pagan. I am not diving into the mythology of any religion, I purely want to focus on the political part. People who worship the God of Abraham, believe in a set of rules dictated by their God. These might be in the form of the Ten Commandments and teachings of various prophets. People who follow these religions by the book commit to these rules set by their God. As I discussed before, religion and politics were indistinguishable in the ancient times. The laws set by God were the rules the government had to abide by. This is how it had been for thousands of years in Europe, Northern Africa, and the Middle East. People who follow these religions respect the word of God, and often fear it. In ancient times, these laws were essential for cooperation in society. Without any set of rules, there would be anarchy and hence, no progress. These religious texts were the law, and the law needed to be followed, because it was the word of God. Ruling through fear of God was necessary and effective. Now, some of these laws are controversial in today's day and age. However, thousands of years ago, not so much. Thousands of years of rule changed the meaning of some of these texts. There arose disputes over different schools of thought. Many sects emerged. As society progressed and the church was separated from the state, the book of law changed. Laws were updated to better suit the rapidly progressing society. Most of the people were indifferent to these gradual changes. Nobody had actually lived in the Islamic Golden Age or lived in the kingdom of King Solomon. Nobody had seen Jesus Christ, they had only read about these periods in religious texts. They believed and worshipped what had been passed down to them by their ancestors. As the laws in modern nations continued to change rapidly, some of these changes were in direct conflict with what was written in the religious texts. Legalizing gay relationships, abolition of slavery, empowerment of women, all these changes were accepted by most of the people. They believed that the advancement in science and a better understanding of the world through a scientific lens should be accepted to take precedence over ancient religious texts. These people are classified as atheists. I will elaborate on atheism later. However, religious people who followed the word of God and the prophets saw these laws as directly against the word of God. This is what happens when laws of a nation are in direct conflict with a law-based religion. I personally might now agree with some parts of the religious laws, but that's okay, each person is free to choose his own belief system. Laws in democracy change according to what the majority of the people want. Slavery was abolished because the public consensus was that it was bad. If the majority of people start to believe that it should be brought back, it will be brought back, either through a democratic process or by force. This can be said for each and every law that exists today. If a candidate decides to run an election based on the campaign of making gay relationships illegal, let him run for office. He will never win, because he will never get the majority vote. The opinion of people makes and breaks laws. If a majority of people decide to revert back to following the church over the laws of the state, the church will rule again. If people decide to follow the new laws that are the new public norm, the church and its God will fall. There is nothing a single person can do about this. Such changes in public perception of law takes generations. Hence, I think that in a perfect democracy, campaigns based on religions must be legal and are completely acceptable. If the majority of people do believe in the fundamental laws of religion, rule of the church will be established, peacefully or with violence. Giving a fair platform to religious groups could also help curb acts of terrorism. Terrorism rises from a sense of oppression. If we make people of all beliefs feel that they have a fair platform against modern ideologies, there would be no need for violence in a fair democracy. This, however, might not completely eradicate terrorism, and we would have criminal charges for that. The second category of religions is the spiritual religions. These religions can be further split across a broad spectrum. These include ancient Greek and Roman pagan religions, Hinduism, Shinto, and the thousands of variations seen in them. All these religions were undeniably linked. They have common myths, common gods, and common philosophies. In fact, it is hard to even label these religions as distinct. It is a commonly accepted theory that Vedic gods and Greek gods had the same root in the Proto-Indo-European religion. These religions have countless gods, and these gods are portrayed as imperfect and having human-like tendencies. These religions are extremely old and far outdate the Abrahamic religions. In contrast, they do not have any set of rules that each individual has to follow. There are just guidelines that one must follow to reach spiritual enlightenment. These religions believe in the concept of souls and rebirth. Their stories are almost uncountable, and some are lost to time. Hinduism wasn't even a unified religion till recently. It is a title given to the group of cultural practices practiced by the people of the Indian subcontinent. Hinduism is a soup of thousands of unique cultures and their stories. It can be argued that the Vedic Hinduism and modern Hinduism are almost totally different religions. The norms of these ancient cultures weren't perfect either. There was discrimination based on gender and caste. In modern societies, these things have been abolished. However, there still exists patriarchy and caste discrimination in society. These are the remains of cultural practices followed by people for many millennia. I believe that Hinduism as a religion is extremely flexible. There is no one God who makes all the rules. Gods are sometimes portrayed as flawed individuals. There is scope for integrating modern ideas into these old cultures. I feel that the label of a Hinduism as a religion implies a Western-style religion based on a set of rules, which is not the case. A shared identity adopted by so many people blurs the line of what a religion is. This, however, doesn't stop people from abusing fake ideals about spiritual religions. A religion is regarded by the common people as true, by the wise as false, and by the rulers as useful. A. Lucius Annius Seneca. This issue is not modern, but can be traced back to thousands of years. People have always tried to curb free-floating ideas and define them under a set of rules to make them easy to comprehend. This could be done intentionally or through a series of misunderstandings. An example of it is beef. It is widely known that eating beef is a taboo in Hinduism. India has even outlawed it. Any person who identifies as a Hindu would say that a cow is equivalent to our mother, and hence, we cannot have a cow's flesh. Cow is treated as a deity in modern Hinduism. However, this wasn't always the case. Beef was consumed in the Vedic period. There are references to eating beef in the Vedas and other religious texts. There is a lot of contradictory material as well, and I do not wish to dive into that, but at best we know that beef was consumed to some extent in Vedic India. Cow and bull sacrifice was common in the Proto-Indo-European religion. This is especially true since Hinduism's sister religions, Greek and Roman paganism, did allow consumption of beef. Why is it then modern Hindus are not permitted to eat beef? The very claim of permission is absurd in a religion with no rules. The sacred texts are merely suggestions, unlike the Ten Commandments of Judaism. Hinduism is fundamentally a philosophy with no rules. It merely has suggestions, which too are often contradictory. These kinds of contradictions, however, are natural for a religion over 5,000 years old. However, what people must understand is that Hinduism does not preach blind faith. It does ask people to submit to their God, but every cultural practice has its roots in wisdom and experience. Take Ayurveda. It is not a magical healing solution that is an alternative to modern medicine. Ayurveda was the modern medicine for that time period. Ayurveda means the art of medicine. Why is it associated with just Hinduism? Surely, we did not have the technology to test synthetic drugs back then or create RNA-based vaccines. But now we do. Yet still, why do people believe that one is better than the other? Ayurveda is nothing but a stream of untested medical practices carried out for thousands of years. Lab-tested medicines should just be a part of Ayurveda by that logic, a modern subset? Why is the word Ayurveda treated so differently as if it was the word of God? It's just medicine, in a natural and unregulated form. The answer to all of this is disillusionment. The loss of an identity faced by people. After an encounter with Western communities and observing their societies blindly following a set of rules set by their God, the pagan religions realized that they had no equivalent of the Ten Commandments. So they, over time, decided to manufacture these fake commandments based on their common practices and label them as rules. There used to be a time where there were scholars who could recite the Vedas from memory. There are no such people now. As our collective understanding of our religion declined, we felt the need to create simpler rules that our society could abide by. Reading the Bible or the Quran wasn't that big of a feat, they are thin books. However, reading all the collective knowledge of the Vedic area was a Herculean feat. And this knowledge grew over time, unlike the books of the Abrahamic religions. We can still observe this phenomenon now, when people compare the Quran and the Bible to Gita. Bhagavad Gita is just one of the thousands of texts of Hinduism. This is caused by the general lack of understanding what kind of a religion Hinduism is. Hinduism faces an identity crisis. It is fundamentally a free and diverse religion that absorbs ideas and communities from a large geographical area. This influence ranged from Western Europe to the Japanese archipelago. Once people try to bind this religion into a set of rules, we get a community that doesn't understand its own religion and follows faith blindly. This is used as a political tool, trying to spread false propaganda about religion. Take the controversial beef ban in India. Why must the government forbid consumption of beef based on religious grounds, if the gods of that religion are said to eat it? Why must all the varied beliefs be united under a single ambiguous label? The people who ask for a Hindu Rashtra are deeply flawed in their understanding of religion. They try to fit these sets of cultures into a single mold like their Western counterparts. There never was a Hindu nation on earth. The idea only originates from its Western counterparts of the Holy Roman Empire or Islamic Caliphate. This fire is only fueled by the Indian alt-right, who use these delusions as a means to get political power. The more people believe in a unified Hindu religion, the more political gain. Some shrewd men have capitalized on the same sentiment of false religious national identity. Modern Hinduism is deeply flawed in its state of blind belief. It is a tool used for manipulation by the capitalists and politicians to procure more money and power. Spread of misinformation benefits them. If they reinforce a false sense of superiority, it would give them more power. And hence, we hear outrageous stories like nuclear power in ancient India or aircraft and space travel. These things that are usually brushed off as unsensible and comical by the wise are trusted and believed by the fools who pledge their faith to pseudoscience. Do I think religion is bad? Absolutely not. In fact, I want religious awareness among the masses. Most of the people who identify as Hindus have never read any sacred texts. Many Muslims go against the way of Allah, either unknowingly or delusionally. Islam is a religion of peace and mercy, and yet Islamic nations are the ones that have the most unrest. The alt-right has transformed Christianity, a religion based on kindness and compassion, into an absurd concept that reinforces racism and capitalist ideals. All of this is a form of religious illiteracy and a lack of understanding of religion. I want to end this era of darkness. Religion is being associated in a negative sense. People think that it is something that should be eradicated. Atheists think that believers are somehow intellectually inferior and flock towards science. How many atheists and believers truly understand religion? Religion was the root of science. In fact, it was science for ancient people. It was a way to answer the natural curiosity of people who did not have the means to know more about the universe they live in through experimentation. It was a way to attain peace of mind and maintain physical and mental health. It was the answer to all the questions that humanity had about the universe since ancient times. A man sitting in Tokyo in 2021, would look at the sky with the same awe as a person living in feudal Japan in the same region, 1,000 years ago. We still have questions about life that we do not know the answer to through science. I believe that religion fills that space for the common folk. And this isn't going to change anytime soon. Religion is here to stay and evolve. For the people who follow atheism, they might prefer some other philosophes to fulfill this thirst for answers. All questions and thoughts of men are directed towards the universe, most of them are directed inward to human nature and emotions. Science cannot answer our thirst for philosophy. People have always wanted, still want, and will want an answer to these questions. Maybe someday, we might transcend all these technological barriers and have all the answers, a theory of everything, but unfortunately we don't have anything right now. Till then, philosophy, and by extension, religion is here to fulfill that curiosity. I am an atheist myself, I cannot relate to any religion I know of. But I understand their importance and role in society. My love for philosophy owes to this very thirst of inner exploration. I would not have read the books I have, if science could answer all the questions I had. The very wisdom I got from those books prompted me to write this essay. One belief, however, I truly despise. It comes in many forms and provides no tangible benefit to mankind. These are fake spiritual beliefs in the form of astrology, tarot cards, mediums, or numerous other hocus-pocus schemes. There is absolutely no truth to them. Their entire belief system is based on prediction of the future, which is impossible. These schemes try to associate themselves with religion, tainting its image. The people who try to sell these schemes of the supernatural are either fools believing in it, or wise capitalists trying to make profits. The reason I covered religion in this essay was to show religion, politics, and capitalism are linked. In a society with no money, the fake schemes should disappear over time. In its place we would get purer religions, based on philosophical beliefs. The scams and violence would disappear if we were to embrace religion for all its teachings. Once you take away the incentive to make money from religion, half of the problems disappear. Religion in politics has been given a bad rep for being manipulative in nature. There is only one way to counter this. Having priests, who know a lot about religion and are interested in preaching the masses with no selfish goal in mind. They preach religion purely out of love for it, and no other monetary motive. We already have priests in today's world, but most of them have some ulterior motives. The motive is most often capitalist and political. No man can survive without money in today's world, and hence, such greed is necessary to gain fame and keep the religion alive. Our new labor-based economic system tackles this issue. There could be real sages, devoted to religion, preaching in exchange for nothing. If there is no monetary gain, people would be less likely to preach false teachings, changing the view of religion yet again. A linked point is religion used to gain political power. Power. Governing bodies are infamously linked with corruption and a general greed for money. In a world with no money, politicians have almost no incentive to be biased, except for their personal beliefs. Politician is a job that seems to belong to the elite. In the new system, however, a politician would just be a regular job. Any person interested in governing could become one by studying political science. In a world with no donations, nepotism, and corruption, if we have a perfect STV democracy, anyone could start a party overnight and run for office. Politicians would no longer be billionaires making decisions for the middle class. When there is true wealth equality, the field of politics would be purified. What incentive would politicians have to falsely manipulate people? Nobody is getting any richer. In a democratic government, one person cannot have all the power to make all the decisions anyway. In fact, there is a lot of work to be done, with no tangible benefit over other fields of occupations. Then why be a fraud politician, if you have interest in something else, and would still have the same purchasing power? Reservation. Caste-based reservation in society is an evil that plagues us all and has devastating effects on society. Reservation is what breeds caste discrimination. In my view, reservation implies only two things. The castes with reservations are intellectually inferior and hence, need support. The castes with reservations are superior to the castes without reservations, because of the benefits they have. Both of these are obviously absurd. One should be able to work and learn only based on his/her merit. The only form of reservation that was acceptable was one based on economically backward individuals, who never got the same opportunities as their richer counterparts. However, reservation based on birth is a very backward idea and a form of discrimination in itself, which should be abolished. Reservation for the traditionally lower caste is oppression for the upper caste. It is morally wrong in society that preaches inequality. For the people that argue that reservation is necessary, because people from lower classes still get oppressed, I'd say that such forms of oppression is a criminal act and should be treated accordingly. Criminal action will be taken against the offenders who try to invade another person's rights. There is no need for extra compensation. Governments need to realize that any form of reservation is oppression and accepting that divisions in society still exist based on one's birth. The reservation system in India was meant to be a mere transitional period anyway, and not a permanent part of the education sector. Another harmful effect of reservation is the poor productivity. Merit-based selection for any field of work or education is the most efficient and effective. If a person had to undergo a surgery, would he rather go to a person who had a straight A record, and was selected based purely on merit, or would he consult a doctor that had C grade, and still was selected because of reservation? Does this not reinforce discrimination? What about the straight A students that were rejected from a university, only to take in a stream of B and Cs, purely based on their caste? Is this morally right? In the new labor-based economic system, there cannot be reservations of any kind. It hampers the efficiency of the society as a whole. We are introducing lower quality labor into the web, harming everyone involved, directly or indirectly. There is no question of poverty-based reservation as well, because wealth inequality no longer exists. As mentioned in the above chapters, the reservation system is an oppressive structure. Nobody would dare touch it, else they fear losing the votes of all the minorities. And they are well versed with the fact that together, all these minorities make up the majority. Reservation must be constitutionally outlawed, so that no party can advertise this oppressive system to gain votes. Freedom of movement. humanity is unlikely to ever unify under a single flag anytime soon. Something like this would only happen if we were to face an external non-human threat. Till then, national borders are here to stay, owing to our cultural differences. National borders may change, be redrawn or even vanish, but national identities of individuals are not going to disappear overnight. However, freedom of movement is possible and would be made easier by the new labor-based system. Any person should be able to change his national identity at will. Travel between nations would require no fee, and hence, there would be many people who are aware of different cultures. Diversity isn't always a good thing, but it is good for introducing new ideas to secluded communities. From food to new philosophies, cultural exchanges enrich the human experience. With no barrier to travel the world, we would have a much more cooperative and tolerant community. There should be no barrier to travel, for leisure or for work. A world with freedom to travel is always a more efficient world. People no longer have financial barriers to fly to lands with better opportunities. We may get a more skilled pool of labor, and there could be areas specialized for specific types of research. It would be better for companies to hire skilled workers from a wider pool. The potential is limitless. The same extends for imports and exports. There should be no limit placed on exchange of goods, as all it would do is hamper efficiency of supply chains. There is no tax to be gained from these restrictions. A government might decide to ban McDonald's from serving burgers to try and incubate local fast food chains. This, however, goes directly against the will of the people, who now have less options to try from. In the new system, a multinational corporation essentially has access to the same resources as a local vendor. There is no big differentiator called a money. The better product will be more successful. People would vote based on their taste. This is the basic principle of a free market economy, corrected and without its only flaw, money. Hence, there is no need to restrict any private company. These companies are no longer looking for profits. They have the same rights and resources as the local companies. This results in a greater variety of products in any market, which is better for everyone. Conclusion. This idea of abolition of money from society sounds very absurd and unrealistic. A feat like this would require a lengthy transitioning period. The mission of this transitionary period is to slowly eliminate the use of money in society. The only way this is possible is by pinning all the world's debt at a few selected bodies and then forgiving that debt. The real challenge is to slowly make things more affordable and easily accessible without triggering hyperinflation. This is easier said than done. The details of such a transitionary period are, by all means, beyond the scope of this essay. Considering you could sit through these 48 pages patiently, if you have any ideas and would like to add to this essay, contact me, Winky Face. This essay is by no means complete. There are millions of ways something like this could affect our civilization. I may have missed a few points too. For constructive criticism, you are free to contact me at inferno080.com@gmail.com. Be sure to leave a review on my blog once you are done, smiley face.